Welcome to the Solid Verbal. And now, Dan and Ty.
Dan Rubenstein, my great and good friend. Welcome back to the Solid Verbal. How are you today?
Good.
What's good?
It's my favorite kind of episode, Ty. An episode in which I can speak on behalf of people who never asked for me to do so. Who in no way are begging me to speak on but no, we're speaking on behalf of ourselves as fans today, and hopefully some of what we say resonates with people who are listening who are also fans, because at the end of the day, we approach this sport as two people who want this sport to thrive, and I think we're going to do our best to represent the people, capital T, capital P. And so if I get to speak on behalf, my wife loves when I do this, by the way. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
Yeah, no, I am.
Not to speak for Jody, but yeah. So I'm excited for this episode.
Welcome back, one and all. Hit follow, hit subscribe. If you are new here, verballers.com is our Patreon if you want to go out and support the team. Today is State of the Union, State of the Sport.
Yeah.
Whatever we want to call it. We promise we won't go as long as the real one. But you and I have a collection of topics, let's say, across college football. We like to do this once a year.
Yeah.
Or we just take a step back, take a step or look, I guess, forward.
Sure.
For what the next steps are for the sport. And we try to suss out where everything is at. You brought this to me this morning.
Yes.
So we each took a little bit of time studying up our respective corners. And you want to grade all of these topics on a scale of 1 to 5. Is that right?
Yeah, this is our more than a State of the Union. This is our annual physical for the sport, right? This is us turning our heads and coughing, but with regard to look it up, kids. With regard to how healthy we feel like various elements of the sport are, with regard to first and foremost, because of how we view the sport. With regard to fandom or interested parties who want this sport to succeed and continue.
Would you say that we're just only fans?
What? I mean, you're gonna have to explain that pun to me. We are not only fans, Ty. We are fans and much more. Ty, this is a college football show, so If you want to focus, this would be a great time, Ty.
Okay. Focus.
But yes, this is us. This is the physical. This is our annual checkup for the sport and saying, okay, what's going on here? You know, we're going to tap a kneecap. Does that still happen? I have no idea.
With the little rubber mallet.
Right.
I mean, I can't imagine that went out of style.
We are going to examine the nodes underneath the jaw. That's a thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an examined thing to make sure everything is good there.
I'm checking them right now. I don't feel any protrusions. I think I'm all right.
So yes, and we're going to talk about the topics that people sort of tend to talk about and have strong opinions about, and figure out how we feel, with one being sort of ruling that this element of the sport is in deep, deep trouble, and 5 being thriving, healthy, couldn't be better.
Why don't we start at the very top, though, before we dive in to any specific elements of college football? What are some key themes for you? I pulled out a few of my own. Just key themes I went through. I did do the health check for all the topics that you threw my way. But then afterwards, I jotted down a couple key themes that, for me, kept coming up as I was thinking about things, not just specific to a topic, but bigger picture where I'm at with college football. Did you have any of those when you were going through this exercise?
Well, I mean, it all comes back to do, re, mi, Ty. It's sort of, I think about when you're talking about the big picture of the sport is where's the money coming from? Who's getting the money? What is the manner through which they're getting the money? Are they getting enough money? Is there enough money? And what is the money deciding for the sport, good or bad? And so if you're talking about the overarching part of this whole conversation, it's the health of the sport is directly tied to how lucrative the sport is at present day and how lucrative the sport will hopefully continue to be moving forward, because we want the sport to be healthy. So that to me informs all of these separate pillars. And so
Yeah.
that's where I would start, right? That like, is the sport in a healthy financial place? 1 through 5, I would say 2.
Okay. I mean, I think one of the related points that I jotted down is that you're right to bring up the money. The infrastructure, though, behind the scenes hasn't really caught up to the money.
Right.
You know, because college football is generating billions of dollars now, whatever it is. But there is no functional regulatory body. It seems as though the contracts aren't enforceable on a bunch of different levels. We don't have collective bargaining. There's not a great accountability structure on top of that.
Right.
The NCAA has all but abandoned trying to govern things for fear of legal exposure. And so we've got a sport that is, in effect, operating at a professional level financially, but at the same time operating almost as an amateur level thing otherwise, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And look, I think there is a disconnect, too, between what people see with regard to money and a lot of the realities on the ground. People see the contracts for coaches. People see the alleged contracts for star players, be they recruits or portal guys or guys who've developed into stars. They see the money that coaches are paid. They see the money that coaches are paid to go away, right? There are certain things that are just going to break through the sports noise. Things like, okay, this is how much money Kurt Signetti is now making. By the way,
Right.
You earn what you can get, right? And so I'm not saying he's not worth every single penny, but then you're also seeing, what's going to cut through the noise? Jimbo Fisher's buyout. You're going to see the number of millions of dollars, tens if not hundreds of millions of dollars. I saw the stat yesterday of like recent SEC buyouts. When you look at the 3 recent Auburn guys and Florida guys and take your pick.
Isn't it like $270 million or something ridiculous?
Right. So your assumption then is these places have so much money they can afford to pay millions of dollars to coaches to go away. And these coaches have so much leverage that they can demand 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, $13 million. So the assumption based on what cuts through the noise is that this sport is flush with cash, right? And yes, for a very, very select few. But then when you see the stories that don't cut through the noise with schools indebted because of maybe bad internal financial decisions or guys thinking they were going to make a bunch of money hitting the portal, then the money turns out to not be there, or making short-term decisions based on money that are not great long-term decisions as recruits or portal players, that's when you get into things like schools cutting sports and scaling back and not being able to retain players who, were under contract and contracts not meaning that much. And so financially, when you see schools going after private equity money or conferences going after private equity money, it's not a signal that they're in a healthy place financially with regard to their place in the sport. So that's tough to me.
I think there are a couple interesting points of real conflict in the sport right now. And the thing that I kept coming back to as I was thinking this through is that many of the things that I think are improving the sport, or at least improving the competition, are also eroding at the culture.
Sure.
Like, objectively speaking, I think NIL, I think the portal to an extent, those are good in that they have spread talent around and have given players more flexibility to kind of take control of their football careers. It has created some parity at the top, not too much parity. I think enough to make it interesting at this point. The on-field product is still fun to watch. We will get into that.
Agree.
For sure. But they have also made, all of those things have also made rosters feel temporary. If you are a fan of a team that maybe is not on that top rung, it feels very transactional, the state of college football. If you're a school, we always bring Pitt up, but if you're a school like a Pitt, like a North Texas, like a whoever, you kind of feel like a feeder program. And those are tensions that sort of run through almost every topic. There is some good, but then also there is some bad.
Right.
And so I just think it speaks to a sport that's really in transition right now. from an identity standpoint. This college football is built on pageantry. It's built on, your loyalty. We always talk about tribes, right? It's a very tribal sport. Things have changed a lot. And even though Saturdays, I think by and large still feel the same, a lot of the other elements of college football that we didn't used to pay attention to, that stuff has changed very rapidly to the point where it feels like the foundation has shifted a little bit.
Right.
Just a very, very different feel to it now than when we first started this show back in 2008.
Yeah, I agree. And look, this sport is also at a place where the money is complicated money, where conference bylaws and conference contracts and payouts to various teams. Now the ACC has unequal payouts. Like the idea of new teams joining conferences, like the Big Ten teams, are not receiving equal rev shares, and so there needs to be money made up elsewhere. And there is something that is inherently anti-fan about how convoluted this all is surrounding money for schools, money for coaches, money for players, where the money is and isn't coming from, what the spirit of where money should be coming from is to be used for, with, collectives and NIL stuff, and we'll get into it. But I just go back to, there seems to be a lot of money at play. There are probably too many teams and too many players trying to participate for it to be actually meaningful for everybody.
Yeah.
And so then that's when you get into, this school has, so many ambitions that they are adding, 20,000 new seats to their stadium. Also, every season ticket package is going up by $3,500, right?
Right.
So, there's this element of like everybody's trying to keep up with everybody. And there's a lot of vanity involved still, with who can pay the most for a roster and who can convince their richest boosters to open up the coffers. And at the end of the day, you're still asking fans to foot so much of the bill, right? That I'm making this up. I'm totally making this up, okay? Texas Tech is spending a bunch of money on its new facility, which they spent whatever it was, $200 million or something on. They're spending money on a roster. Are they going to spend money in the next 5-7 years on new stadium stuff? Is it all coming privately? Who's footing every single bill for Texas Tech or for Indiana or for Oregon? Like, at a certain point, the hand is going to be out for fans to pay more for parking, more for merchandise, more for season tickets, more for suites, more for like the seat licensing stuff. Like, we're in a I don't know what the opposite of a golden era is, but we're in a trash era for fan affordability for this sport. And then you get into like, okay, you're not going to the game. You might have to watch this Notre Dame game on Peacock. Sorry. There's stuff. There's hidden costs everywhere.
Why don't we dive in a little bit deeper?
Please.
You sent me the list of topics. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with conference structure. Let's start with the overall organization of teams across this sport. Do you feel like this sport is structured, and I say both the grouping of teams with how they're grouped across conferences, or not in conferences in the case of a couple teams, we're talking FBS only here, as well as the way conferences are structuring who they play and when they play and how many times they play certain teams?
Yeah, so I kind of broke the scheduling thing off.
Okay, we can do that.
But in terms of conference structure, I would give it a 3 out of 5 on the health meter.
Okay. Decent, iffy, somewhere in there.
Somewhere in the middle. Conferences are too big.
Yep.
They're too big. It's created problems. We have these ridiculous tiebreaker scenarios. We have conference championship games that, to me, still feel kind of disconnected from the regular season. I think we should just get rid of them altogether, start the playoffs earlier so that the season doesn't go until the end of January.
Right.
But there's the conversation about the size of these conferences that I'd be remiss to go any further without mentioning it. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier, a sport in transition, so much of what we grew up with is sort of removed now from this latest iteration of college football. There is a real loss of that geographic identity with the way that conferences are now structured. And I think in large part, that might be the biggest cultural shift that we have seen in this sport. Never mind the NIL and the transfer portal stuff, which in its own right has been seismic. But something of a loss of that geographic identity is very real, and we hear about it all the time. Being an SEC fan has been an identity. I mean, it still is.
Sure, of course.
Don't get me wrong. But as conferences keep expanding these footprints, Dan, what does it mean to be a quote-unquote Big Ten fan?
Well, I don't think anybody ever was truly a Big Ten
I know,
fan.
but it just feels to me like Big Ten fandom as a whole, regardless of conference, whatever that identity used to be, it feels drastically different now because, let's face it, conferences are basically becoming media companies with like football teams instead of a regional, let's call it athletic association the way they used to be.
Right.
It's just different now. So that to me is troubling. And I think of all the things related to conference structure, that's the one that people have written in about the most. We could talk specifically about the Pac-12 and how it hurts to lose the Pac-12. I know that's near and dear to your heart. The one thing I will say is this. I don't hate the bigger conferences because it does mean we get some really interesting regular season matchups.
There's 100% upside, yes.
There's a lot of upside there. Like we went to go see Oregon at Penn State, the whiteout game. We've also had like Texas against Bama, right? Like you can go right down the list here. These are games that would have otherwise been reserved for bowl games like a decade ago. So for me, that's the real silver lining in all this, despite the fact that there is something of an identity loss. I do think one of the things we get as a result is better in-season matchups, which I think is probably a net gain for the fans.
100% is a net gain for the fans. So there's obviously nothing preventing some of these matchups from happening in the non-conference portion of the schedule, right? And so the scheduling is the other part of this, that like the old Pac-10-12 could have a scheduling agreement with a different conference every year, and we could get a rotating Penn State USC, Penn State Oregon, Penn State Washington, stuff like that. We could get regular rotating matchups like that. You know, SEC, ACC, SEC Big Ten, SEC Big 12, Big 12 ACC, right? You could regulate that we get these big matchups. You could break the sport into like bowl and non-bowl tiers where, you know, every year you're going to have, you know, two games if you're in the Big 12 against two ACC bowl teams. And, you know, it just rotates over the year in the way that the NFL rotates which divisions play which teams.
Yeah, I have more scheduling thoughts. I'll get to that next, but please continue.
So there's the obvious upside is new matchups, an opportunity for new bad blood, an opportunity for new storylines and narratives and matchups, whatever. That's cool. Like, it's undeniably cool. The downside is what you are talking about, you know, the conference identity of the Big Ten, the SEC. Like, the SEC just has like a Big 12 wing to me with A&M, Mizzou, Texas, and Oklahoma. That's just all it is. The Big Ten has a West Coast wing. The ACC has a weird Western wing with the Bay Area and SMU. That they just feel like strange appendages. They don't actually feel like a part of the conference in the way that we've grown to accept conference identities. Like that, I would imagine everybody listening to this show that is over 30, which I imagine is about 99.2% of you, like grew up thinking, okay, Big Ten, gonna watch like Michigan State, Iowa, or, you know, Michigan, Penn State, something like that, where you grew to accept a certain identity, whether it's like, you know, Curtis Enos or something, Tyrone Wheatley mashing the ball down against another team, that there is that identity. And I know identities evolve and identities change, but when you add all of these teams to all of these conferences, and I thought all of these conferences have done an impressive job with whatever they're trying to do to survive and maximize their capital B brand value. You sort of dilute everything, right? You dilute what it means to be a Big Ten team. The idea that Maryland's in the Big Ten is something I still refuse to believe. And like even just like Boston College and Pitt in the ACC, it just, I don't know. It feels off to me. Like Louisville in the ACC feels off to me. Like there's just certain things that are just like, I don't know, man. I know I have to accept reality, but like it's still very strange to see. And then you're going to get, again, this is the scheduling part of things though, but like when the conference is that big, you don't have the overlap of like, okay, the Pac-10 has 10 teams and they play a 9-game schedule, so we can kind of measure up everybody against each other. And nobody gets like this weirdly bad schedule or this weirdly impossible schedule with how it all plays out. And so we've talked about the scar tissue before that, you know, West Coast teams no longer play each other outside of the couple who have joined the Big Ten and the couple who have joined the ACC. So it's just like, I don't know. I feel like in a lot of ways it's antithetical to how a lot of us have grown to accept the sport. And I think in the long run, we are going to look back at this stretch as not a blip, but like, oh, that weird time, those gap years, the second wife between the first and the third. Kind of like, oh yeah, Deborah. Is
that what her name is? Deborah?
Always
We're going with
Deborah. Always Deborah, Ty. Prepare yourself.
Love Deb.
That to me is how we're going to look back at, like, wasn't it crazy when Stanford and Cal were in the ACC? So I have it as a 2.
I have it. Yeah, I have it as we're about the same. I've got it as a 3. You've got it as a 2. By the way, we're at about 21% under the age of 30. In case you were wondering.
Whoa. Okay.
I've got the graph in front of me. What'd you say? 0.8. We have a much younger
number,
audience than you realize.
Was that number as of 15 years ago though? As everybody above?
No, I'm looking at it right now.
Oh, okay.
Up to the minute, man.
Shout out to everybody under 30. You have incredible Riz. You're bussin'.
Don't give it away, man. Don't give it away.
Anything else terminology I'm missing here, Ty? Riz, bussin'.
Okay.
Oh man.
Here's the final point that I have.
Ty, I'm old maxing right now.
Is that?
Have you heard maxing? It's maxing
I asked
and
Kate
mogging.
about that the other day.
Yeah.
Kate is a little bit more in tune with that than I am.
I'm washed maxing.
Yeah. Here's what I would point out.
Yeah.
As my final item as for this conversation now is the conference structure.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a little bit of Ty created fan fiction. I don't know. Part of me hopes that we do end up with super conferences. I hope these conferences get so big and so unwieldy that quite literally nothing makes sense unless they have to break it up into regional pods.
Yeah.
Which functionally would be the same as the old conference structure.
Mm-hmm.
We can call it whatever we want. But if the Big Ten gets so big that it basically has to break off into a Pacific or West Coast division, and then we get some of those more historic, more traditional matchups that we're accustomed to, I'd be cool with that. I'm not great with super conferences just as a concept. But if we end up with that via mega conferences to protect some of those rivalries into the future, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is the Carl's Jr. Hardee's-ization.
Right. I was thinking more of the AT&T singularization of...
Well, I feel like AT&T just bought Singular, didn't it?
Well, they did, but then they all broke up and they kind of went their separate ways. And
But I think Carl's Jr. and Hardee's are the same parent company, but branded differently in different regions, like Best Foods and Hellman's, right?
Okay, great.
I think that's... I'm sure there are other examples here, but I think people would be down with that. So it's like Big Ten Pacific, right? Yeah. Big Ten Midwest, Big Ten East. It's very strange and unwieldy, but
so weird.
If we get to a point where like, okay, the Big Ten is responding to the SEC adding so-and-so teams by poaching Stanford and Cal, and you're like, so we're going to have a conference with Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Cal, and USC and UCLA?
Right.
All right, that sounds familiar to me. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people would hate on that, but it's also, much more monopolistic, and you have even more power concentration, which doesn't seem great for any industry.
Well, we'll get to that part.
It seems pretty anti-competitive at the same time, but you get familiar matchups. So I don't know.
We'll get to that part. Maybe if we get conferences that big, we can start kicking the tires on promotion and relegation. My lifelong dream.
I'm anti.
All right. Let's zoom in on the scheduling.
Please.
Scheduling scale of 1 to 5. Where is it at health-wise?
I actually think I'm sort of between a 3 and 4. I'm a 3.6. Are we allowed to do decimals here?
Sure. It's your show.
With the SEC going to 9 games, and, we've seen the stories about Alabama hemming and hawing allegedly about the Ohio State matchup and Texas canceling ASU. And I'm sure there are going to be teams in the Big Ten who are going to question future matchups based on whether or not it gets them into the playoff, if it stays at 12 or 16 or whatever. But 9-game conference schedules, I think can only be a good thing. We're trying to maximize the number of intriguing games, intrigue matchups.
Maxing is what you're describing.
Quality maxing.
Quality maxing. Yeah.
I have no idea if we're using this terminology correctly.
I have no idea either.
That's what the sort of uproar was about the SEC as like, why would we schedule these interesting events when they're going to be held against us? And I think it's looked at improperly, but I understand the frustration that if you're only going to look at the number in the loss column without the full context, that's frustrating.
It is frustrating.
Now,
I totally get that.
If you nearly lose to Mississippi State and Kentucky and do lose to Florida, those losses are meaningful as well. And those wins are meaningful. Like, you should look at the full context. I think we're just going to get to the point where everybody's going to be in the playoff. And so we're not going to have to worry about those arguments. And so hopefully we do see interesting Texas, Michigan type home and homes once again. But I think from a scheduling perspective, I think the thing that we're still missing is regulating FCS opponents. Are we for regulating FCS opponents?
Right.
Are we anti?
Right.
Should we take, is there some sort of, even if it's not fully centralized on a national level, like, can we sort of standardize how these home and homes or TV games on neutral sites are scheduled? Like, that to me is the one thing that we're truly missing in the sport, is leaving scheduling up to the schools themselves rather than having some kind of regulated, okay, the Big 12 for the next 5 years is going to be rotating and playing Big 10 teams kind of stuff.
Right.
That to me is the last. And look, I understand why these teams do the bye games and play FCS teams or play lower level G6 games. Like, it's a meaningful payday for a lot of these places that keeps them afloat to whatever level. And for the good of the health of the sport, I'm open to it. Maybe let's not play those games on November 15th, SEC. Maybe let's standardize when those games are happening. But I think if we can regulate and standardize how teams schedule each other outside of the conference, then we're really cooking with gas.
What I found interesting when I went through this is so many of the items that I took issue with were more related to the calendar than they were the scheduling.
Right.
And so I actually gave it a 4 out of 5.
Okay.
I gave it a 4 out of 5 because, with conferences going to more conference games, I think that's a net gain for the fans. One point of contention that I have had for a long time, and we talked about this time and again on this show, gosh, I feel like forever. Why do we need to schedule games 5 years in advance?
It's a good question. I mean, teams want to get out ahead of it, and they want to make sure that they can fill before their options become limited. But that's another point. Like, why is the Baylor AD or whoever is making these decisions in Waco, why is he or she able to say, like, yeah, let's just schedule Virginia in 2044?
Because, like, a recent example now is what the Pac-12 is doing with flex scheduling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a thing that more conferences should consider. Now we got to see how it goes with more conference games and, the SEC. But, like, the idea would be very simple. Leave a late season slot open. Let the conference or whoever, I don't know, let somebody decide a matchup based on who is in the best position maybe to make the playoffs. I guess each conference could set their own criteria. Obviously, if it's a smaller conference like the Pac-12, then it maybe has a little bit of a different meaning than if you're in one that's got 16 or 18 teams. But I think adding some element of variability would be really interesting.
See,
I don't know if everybody would go for it, but I think that would be interesting to me.
But I don't know
certainly
if that
more
lives I don't know if that lives in real life, by the way. The like open date flex schedule.
Well, it does for the Pac-12.
It does for the Pac-12, but they're sort of, it's not gimmicky, but they're trying to do what they can to be innovative and see if it works. I just think
they're trying to boost their playoff credibility by doing it. They're trying to give their best teams a shot to play better competitions, see where their strength of schedule comes down, and maybe pour a little bit of gasoline on that possibility. I think it's a novel idea. I'm curious to see how it works in practicality. You mentioned FCS teams. These FCS games almost never produce a competitive game.
Right.
Almost never. In some cases, maybe, but those are few and far between. I would say from the standpoint of a fan watching the games, I would prefer to see a game that's a little bit more competitive. That being said, if we are looking at this thing holistically, FCS programs rely on that income in order to stay afloat. So maybe there's some regulation or mandates that need to go on to help govern when those teams are played and how often they're played and that type of thing. I don't think it's something you can completely banish, even if it doesn't make for the most competitive games.
Yeah. Or you just like, those are week 1 or week 2. Those are week 0 or week 1. Yeah.
And my biggest proposal is just to get rid of week 0.
And just call it week 1?
Just call it week 1, man. What are we doing?
Start the season a week before.
What is this? We already have a timing issue with the season running too long.
Right.
And the postseason this year is going to stretch to like, what is it, January 20th or 21st or 25th? It's late in January. It's an extra week. If we're going to add a week at the start of the season, or if we're going to, I should say, add a week to the end of the season, just push everything up a week, man. What are we doing here?
Okay, so you're pushing everything. You're eliminating a week of summer. You're pushing camp up a week, which I get. You know, a lot of these places are very hot. So you're just
I'm pushing the season up a week to week 0. I'm getting rid of week 0. It's dumb.
A lot of night games, right? If you're playing in the deep south, if you're playing in Arizona or something like that in late August,
and then I'm also getting rid of conference championship games. I understand this is more of a calendar thing than it is actually like a scheduling thing.
Yeah,
but move it up a week. Get rid of conference championship games. This is not a new proposal. I've heard a lot of people talking about this, but there is no reason the season needs to run this long. There's no reason we need 10 days in between playoff games. Get this whole thing over as quickly as we can, as close to, if not on January 1st as possible, so that the rest of the calendar can work itself out.
But right now, what you're doing is you are prescribing ways to improve. Like, yes, when I go to my physical, I should run a 10K every morning. There are a lot of things that make sense for me to do. We're evaluating the current health, not looking at the, like, drink more water, eat more fiber.
I give it a 4.
Okay.
Current health, I give it a 4. If we were to lump this together with some of my wacky proposals, I don't think they're that wacky, but some of my proposals, lump it in with that broader calendar discussion that everybody seems to take issue with right now. That's how we get to a 5. But right now, as it stands, I would tend to agree with you. 3.5, 4. That feels about right to me.
I think every year that Notre Dame decides, if we're going to prescribe something, every year that Notre Dame decides that no, they're not going to join a conference this year, one true home game is taken away. Notre Dame will have to play 11 true road games, no neutrals.
Okay.
If they want to keep along this path. As teams are adding conference games and we're moving the season up and we're taking away conference championship games, which Notre Dame already wasn't playing in.
Stop it.
You take away one home game for Notre Dame each season they don't join a conference.
Natural transition then to the college football playoff.
Okay. Where's your health? What's your health evaluation for the playoff?
Something tells me you and I are going to disagree greatly on this.
Okay. We'll see.
I'm at a 4 or 5 on it.
4 out of 5.
4 out of 5.
Okay.
Where are you at?
2.
I've always been a playoff guy.
Yeah.
You know, I want the champions settled on the field. I don't want to argue about it in a conference room. I don't want to leave it up to a computer. That is my baseline, always and forever. Established 1981, that is where I am at. And the fact that we now have a 12-team format that I think mostly works, we can argue about the process, and I will. But for me, I think that's a huge win.
Okay.
And I'll acknowledge it's not perfect. But having done this with me for all of these years, that has always been my consistent stance on the playoff and the postseason.
All I hear when I talk to the I'm going to be careful what I say here, Ty. All I hear when I speak to the least creative, weirdest people I come across is, you better embrace AI now, man. And all of a sudden, you don't want a computer? You want Hunter Yurachek? You want that eye deciding things? Okay.
What does that have to do with... Are you implying that Hunter Yurachek is like ChatGPT?
Well, no. What I'm saying is, everybody's saying you have to lean into the computer, except for you, Ty.
Right.
You're saying...
I'm a computer guy.
Instead of AI, you want Hunter eye, right?
No, I don't want that. That's my next point here on my sheet.
Well, you're like, it's not perfect.
That's why it's not perfect, because of Hunter Yurachek.
I'm at it too because I don't have anything to evaluate. It changes every year, right? That our playoff structure is defined only by change. Changing who is in the committee, how many committee members there are, what the committee's stance is, how many teams there are, how many teams get automatic bids, or I guess which teams get automatic bids. We have no consistent data to go on. And so there are elements of the playoff I love, right? I love the novelty of the playoff paired with an ability to improve your roster in novel ways gives us novel results like Indiana this year. I think it's a good thing to bring more people, fans, even if they're casual fans, into the tent. I'm great with that. I'm great with the idea of if we hire the right coach, if we hire the right tamper squad, then we can build a roster that's more competitive than any roster we can remember. I think that's an interesting element to college football in 2026 and moving forward. But with regard to the playoff, one, the conversation around the playoff is nonstop toxic. Nonstop. Yeah. It brings out the worst in people, which is very difficult to do when you're as consistently the worst as somebody like Urban Meyer is, right? Like, it's tough to have like an Urban Meyer take be especially awful. But here we are. And so that to me is not a great thing for the playoff. The idea of the playoff expanding to the point where teams are willing to cancel interesting regular season matchups. How many games are we going to go up to? How many, teams making the playoff are we going to go up to where teams are going to start making, start bench decisions like NFL teams in week 17, 18, 19, wherever the NFL is right now? I worry about that with the playoff. If we go to 24 teams, then you're dealing with, okay, how many playoff games is this team going to play? Do I have to make rest decisions that I didn't have to make before? So where we are now with the playoff, I give a 2 because it's just an exercise in changing things constantly, toxic conversation, affecting the regular season. I think the on-field product has been outstanding for the most part in the college football playoff, which is why it's not a 1. That brings it up to me. But having all these games because of the bowls playing domes, I don't know. There's just nothing consistent to me about the playoff, and that's why it sort of gets tugged down to a 2.
All right. Well, let me start on that note.
Okay.
And I knew we were going to fundamentally disagree on this.
Yeah.
We've always disagreed on this. The process bothers me. The selection process bothers me. And I wish I had a better solution.
The TV show.
But yeah, right now, and that's my beef with it. Right now, it feels artificial, and it feels like it's made for TV drama.
Mm-hmm.
Like this past season, that was what the entire thing was this past season. I'm not saying they picked the wrong teams per se, but it was manufactured drama. We don't need that. This weekly ranking show, the reveals, like the talking heads arguing over bubble teams, but then they're not really bubble teams in the very, like, all of that, I think, underscores a complaint that people have been writing into us about for the last couple years, and that is that this is a process built for the networks and for the suits and not necessarily to establish further credibility for the system.
Right.
That's an issue that they got to try and resolve. Maybe they don't have to resolve it because the money's already there, but from my standpoint, that's a problem. I'd rather they just release the damn rankings, Dan. Give us like a written rationale and we can all read it on ESPN.com and we'll just go with that. We don't need Reese Davis badgering Hunter Yurachek or whoever. That doesn't do anything for me. It really doesn't.
You're right. It's finding the line between, okay, is this a thing about competition or is this a thing about story, right? The term we like to use, right? Too cute. ESPN got too cute with its weekly TV show.
Like, I don't need that. I have yet to meet anybody who, and I know a lot of people make content around it, and we're in that group as well.
Yeah.
But like, I think if you gave people truth serum, even the ones that are going live right after those rankings reveals, with truth serum, they all be like, we don't need this.
Right. It's just an exercise.
We don't need this.
Yeah.
What do we need this for?
Yeah.
Just release it on the website. So that's the first issue that I take with it. And then the second is not where it's at right now, but where I fear it could go. And I really feel like they're losing people with this constant talk of expansion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like 12 is fine. I'm okay with 12. I think 16 is probably my line in the sand.
Yeah.
I think you can get to 16 without upsetting the balance too much. But anything beyond 16, man, I mean, that changes the sport. You go to 24 teams, which is being talked about, I feel like, every week now.
Mm-hmm.
I worry that waters down the regular season in a way that I'm just not comfortable with. And so I'm curious to see where they come down on things. It also feels to me like those conversations are not being driven by fans. I don't know who's asking for that. That's Tony Petitti. That's Greg Sankey. That's probably the suits at ESPN.
Right. They're trying to make it into something that was never an appeal point about the sport for people of at least of a certain age, right? We're, aging ourselves here, but like, the Riz is clear, Ty.
Stop it. Stop with this now.
Sorry.
What did I say? 22 per 21%, whatever it is. It's going to be down to like 10%.
You just don't understand my generation, Ty. You just don't understand how we
as we're
speak.
playoff maxing here. Yes, of course.
No, it's not understanding the main thing. It's not understanding the appeal point. It's saying like, oh, everything evolves, everything changes. And then people stop watching and people stop paying attention because you alienate enough of them.
Now, I think having greater access matters.
Sure.
And I know this is something that we talked a lot about in the immediate aftermath after we found out what the brackets looked like.
Yeah.
But I stand by it, and I don't care if there were upsets, or excuse me, I don't care if there were blowouts.
Mm-hmm.
There have been blowouts since they put the 4-team playoff in place.
That's true.
Since the BCS was put in place. Blowouts happen. That is not a reason not to do something. I think the fact that James Madison and Tulane got in at all is a very, very big deal.
Definitely.
I think this sport is better when a team like a JMU or a Tulane can get there, even if they're going to get walloped once they arrive.
Right.
Truly. I think if everybody is going to be under the FBS umbrella, it only seems fair to me that everybody should have a shot to get into that tournament.
And when JMU gets to the playoff, no matter what happens, they accumulate the clout and the attention and the goodwill needed to hire, and it says here, Billy Napier. It says here on my sheet.
And lose their coach to UCLA.
Well, that you understand, right? Yeah, like when you succeed at a high level as a medium-sized school, a smaller school, that's a risk. But Billy Napier is a choice.
Billy Napier is a choice. I don't hate that choice, but
okay.
I thought the playoff, just as a TV show, as a fan of the sport, I thought the playoffs were great. I really enjoyed the playoffs this year. I think giving access to the likes of James Madison and Tulane, really any G5 school, I like that is a possibility that we can get two of those teams in.
Sure.
And again, I just harken back to what I've been saying all these years now. If you're going to play any sport, you need to have a real, fair way of determining a champion.
Yep.
And a playoff, I think, in my opinion, is the best way to do that.
If everybody's considered to be, an FBS team or something, like, right? Everybody is
just
can play each other in bowl games, can play each other during the regular season.
And everybody should have a shot at the thing. And I'm not going to act like all teams are created equal.
Right.
We know that's not the case. We'll get into NIL and revenue sharing and all that crap. But I think what's fair is fair. I give it a 4 out of 5 for now. I think there are ways they could push it up to a 5, maybe by modifying the process. But I think the health, by and large, of the playoff is still in a place where I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah. Okay. I disagree, but the best thing about the playoff is clearly the ability to have high level competition, be it in the opening round, quarters, semis, championship game, especially between teams who haven't always been there or rarely get there or are now able to position themselves via, the NIL portal era as somebody who can build a playoff, if not championship caliber team. So we're access maxing here, Ty.
Scale of 1 to 5. What is the health of the TV product, Dan? Watching the games on TV as a fan at home.
I have it as a 4.
I have it as a 4 as well.
I think it's very easy to nitpick the smaller elements of watching the game at home. And there are definitely things that take it from a 5 to a 4, despite having way more access. Like if I live in Juneau, if I live in Bucharest, and I'm a North Texas fan, if I'm a Colgate fan, if I'm a, Eastern Washington fan, Oregon State fan, whatever, I can figure out a pretty direct way to watch it. Maybe I need a VPN or something if I'm in Bucharest.
I would love to know how you're watching Eastern Washington from Bucharest, but continue.
I'm doing a lot of VPN research, and then whatever.
A lot of NordVPN subscriptions.
But it's not a sponsor, could be.
Not a sponsor, could be.
But the availability of these games, the availability of a high percentage of these games broadcast in high quality HD or even 4K, the availability of a lot of these bigger matchups, especially in the playoff, to watch it with a radio call from your local team or from the Skycam or, that there are just options available to watch it on your phone via YouTube TV, to watch it, if you're on vacation. Like there's just the access, the quality, and I'm not even talking about announcers. That's highly subjective, right?
Sure.
But I can't question that 100% of these announcers aren't trying to do their best. Nobody's throwing the broadcast. Like, they're trying their best. Some of them you're just not going to like. Some of them you're going to feel like, whether it's, in reality or not, are sort of rooting for an outcome or sympathetic to one team over the other. But I think a lot of them, 99% of them will say, are trying their best to provide a quality broadcast.
And the other 1% is Tim Brando. Continue.
Right. I think we are at a golden era if we're strictly talking about the TV product of games themselves. And there are things that are going to inform that, right? That we have the Big Ten accepting so much money from Fox that Fox can dictate, Ohio State, you're playing all your games at 12 Eastern. That stinks for the fan.
I jotted that down.
That's no good.
That's no good.
Because a big game is happening in the Fox noon window, that UCLA or Oregon is going to be playing a 9 a.m. body clock game at Northwestern or something. That's not amazing. But in terms of you sitting on your couch and being able to watch your team in a high quality broadcast, and yes, there are going to be the late nights, there are going to be the early mornings, there are going to be the difficult to finds situation. You're like, we're playing on ESPN Plus. Do we get ESPN Plus? Do I have the ESPN Plus app? Do they make the ESPN Plus app for, your Amazon, whatever? Yes, it's much more complicated, and that's not great. But these are all surmountable obstacles to me that you can figure out within 5 to 8 minutes. So I'm gonna keep it at a 4. If you're talking about the totality of college football on television and you include studio shows and game day and stuff like that,
and like Meghan Trainor State Farm commercials and things of that nature,
drug commercials, your Sky Rizzies, your Wheeze Govey, it's closer to a 2. I think we are not in a golden era of shoulder programming, my opinion. But in terms of the games themselves, in terms of working some of younger, recently retired players as color analysts or sideline people. Like, I think it's at a high quality place.
The broadcasts, I would say, generally are pretty good.
Yep.
And there are more of them than ever before. That's a win.
Yep.
B, they made an effort 2 years ago now to try and shorten games. I think that's helped.
Yep.
I think the product moves a little quicker than it did a couple years ago. I hope we get more of the 4K broadcast. Right now, the 4K broadcasts are like the biggest unlock.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got access to it, because especially if you're watching on ESPN, as I did through most of the playoff games, when they go to commercial, they just go to like a static camera shot.
And sometimes people are making out. Wasn't that a
sometimes
thing?
people are making out. You never know what you're going to see on that camera shot.
4K smooching.
But the 4K technology has now found its way into the broadcast. That's been the case for a couple of years, but it seems as if they've added to that, which I think is a pretty good thing for the home viewer. I share your admiration for the Skycam. I love watching games on the Skycam.
Yeah.
But, we've seen, I think, a little bit more of that. The things that I would call out, though, other than the commercials, which I know everybody hates, I'm pro replay. The replay is a little much. It's a little much right now. And this is more of an on-field product thing that I think we can talk about next. But I think the replay technology and the ways that they show the replay to the home viewer, specifically like what they did with the ACC and how they gave you access to the two-way communications between the head official and the command center, I thought that part was awesome. That was the biggest level up
transparent
that we saw all of this past season. That was awesome. So they did, from a TV product standpoint, they did a good job of that. It's just unfortunate that because we have so many replays, it makes the games drone on a little bit longer, and I think does sometimes throw some cold water on the experience. But beyond that, I think the tech is in a really good spot. I think there have been great strides. There's probably an entirely separate podcast episode we can do on-screen graphics, which I think you'd be very passionate about.
Yeah.
But we don't need to go there.
Can we go one place? Can we go one place?
Sure.
It's not about on-screen graphics. My favorite thing that I didn't even know was going to be my favorite thing happened during the Gator Bowl this year. I don't know if you're going to know what I'm talking about when I say that.
The Gator Bowl.
It was between, I think, Mizzou and Virginia. The Gator Bowl in Jacksonville? Yes?
Okay.
Is the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville?
I believe so.
Gator Bowl, Jacksonville. Yes. The Tax Slayer Gator Bowl.
Great.
At Everbank Stadium.
Love Everbank.
This was not unique to ESPN's broadcast this year. I think Fox made the same mistake a couple years ago. They recycled B-roll and showed a waterside mall that was demolished in 2019 as they were coming back from commercial. That's just going to happen. That's just going to happen, especially when you don't vary what you film. When games are in Seattle, they always show the fish being thrown at Pike's Market. Gotta throw the fish. Gotta throw the fish. So maybe that brings it down from a 5 to a 4, that they're not sending people to get B-roll shots before these games. But I can live with all of that. It is funny, though. I think we're in a good place. I think we are largely a good place.
4 out of 5. 4 out of 5.
Yeah, same.
On-field product, Dan. 1 through 5, where are you at?
5 out of 5.
I, too, have a 5 out of 5.
Okay. There is something about where we are right now. And I just went through the last couple of years and I looked at the quarterbacks. I looked at some of the running back names. And maybe it's just because it's March and I'm wistful and I miss watching these games. Or I'm like, yeah, that guy was the 67th most efficient quarterback. But I enjoyed watching Lenoris Sellers. There's an entertainment factor. There is, especially at or near the top, or especially with quarterbacks, that if a quarterback is at a big enough place, that there's at least a conversation about returning and having more consistency, which I think is a positive thing. Now, we're always going to see quarterback movement, right? We're always going to see Sam Levitt go to LSU or a Brendan Sorsby go to Texas Tech. But at least it's a conversation that a guy doesn't have to always go to the NFL after a really strong junior season or redshirt junior season, that if somebody is important enough to their team and that the team is treated well, the culture is strong enough at a place that you can have some continuity, at least at the top of your roster. It's tough to bring back like an entire promising backup defensive line, understandably so, especially if you're Ohio State or Oregon or Alabama or something. But the on-field product, the number of quality quarterbacks that we've had across the sport in recent years, at James Madison, at North Texas, at wherever, take your pick. It's not going to be everybody, but I've enjoyed the quality of this sport at a really high level. You're going to have, down years in terms of like always getting big games because teams like, Clemson or Penn State last year, I'm not picking on them specifically. But
listen, Pinstripe Bowl,
that's
represent.
True.
Please continue.
There are going to be instances where if you have a schedule in August and you're saying like, man, these are the big games across this conference this year, and it involves one or two teams across many of those big games, and both of those teams or one of those teams completely falls off the map, it's going to affect things. But just in terms of competition and maybe the portal affecting the top team's depth is affecting this as well, that LSU can't build a 3 deep. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, all of these teams can't build a 2-3 deep that's bulletproof in the way they could before. So we're getting more competitive games. I think it's a great thing for turning on a game, especially between ranked teams, and getting a 31-28 result.
I think the football's really good right now.
I think it's great.
I think it's really good. I think the players coming in are better prepared than ever to contribute right away.
Mm-hmm.
I think the talent level is as high as it's ever been, and it's spread out a little bit more. And just the quality of play specifically at the top is excellent. It's a really, really good watch. There is more parity than there used to be.
Right.
At least among, let's say, the top 25 teams or so. It doesn't feel like the SEC is superior the way it did for like a decade plus during Saban's run.
No.
And the portal and NIL, they've really had something of an equalizing effect here.
You can address weaknesses, and you can't hoard talent. There's even across, you can take any conference you want. Like New Mexico can all of the sudden become really good in the Mountain West by hiring and portaling in efficiently.
And this is the great conflict of the sport in 2026.
Yeah.
Because the same forces that are having such a destabilizing effect, which we can talk about next, NIL, the transfer portal, I think are also mostly related to the parity that we see with the competition on the field, not being able to build out that depth, being able to spread some of the talent around, giving guys an opportunity to go and play right away. We had questions about this at the very start. Is this going to mean more parity? What will this mean for competition? All of these questions that we had, I think we're starting to see some answers now that we're a couple years into this thing.
Mm-hmm.
It has meant more parity. Not the NFL. It's not the NFL. But a little bit of parity, I think, has gone a long way towards improving the overall fan experience. So I think that's good. All that stuff is good. And everything that you brought up, I think, is very relevant.
By the way,
two things. Go ahead.
Just on that note, just to jump in quickly in terms of parity, like look at the Big 12. The Big 12 is not the best conference, and you just did a show with John Kurtz. You did a very good job, Ty. You should be proud of yourself.
Thank you.
The Big 12 this past season was not the best. There was a clear alpha, right, in Texas Tech. Look at the quarterbacks in the Big 12. Basically, it's essentially impossible to find a quarterback who is neither entertaining nor good, right? Yeah. Even the ones who were not great were pretty entertaining. Sawyer Robertson threw for a ton of yards, threw 30 touchdowns, entertaining and good. Josh Hoover, Noah Fafita, Brendan Sorsby, Baron Morton until the end, Bear Bachmeyer, Rocco Beck, Jalen Daniels, Connor Wigman, Devin Dampier, Avery Johnson. Like, I just named 11 dudes in the Big 12.
Yep.
Like, maybe you can have that conversation about Taven Jackson as the 12th, and maybe he wasn't great, or Caden Salter, like Colorado's offense really struggled this year. But I don't know. You're getting enough entertainment and quality going that deep into a conference at quarterback. You're in a good place in terms of an on-field product.
The two things that I would bring up that I thought about maybe knocking this down to a 4.5.
Yeah.
It does feel like, as compared to, I don't know, 20 years ago, there are more teams playing the same way now.
Sure.
Stylistically. You used to have a real contrast of styles if you watched a game on Saturdays. You had the smash mouth Big Ten style football, of course, SEC speed.
Quarterbacks in the Pac-10. Yeah, 12.
I think of like Big 12 air raid offenses, that type of thing. Now almost everybody is running some version of a spread concept or RPOs, usually both. And that's fine. And I think that convergence probably happens because everything works, right?
Yeah.
But I do miss some of that variety when I turn on the television on a Saturday. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is the officiating is getting worse.
Officiating's not great. That's part of the on-field product. I hear you.
And that does take away from the product.
Yep.
And I have spoken to this at length before. I'll bring it up again now. There is more money in this sport than ever before. Make these guys full-time employees the way the NFL makes them full-time employees.
Mm-hmm.
That's one very easy way that I think you can improve the quality. Better training, you get more consistency, hopefully fewer blown calls in some of those big moments. Again, the money is there. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
The idea that you can't afford to professionalize your referees while you're handing out millions in NIL and just billions in media rights, that to me is a position that's hard to take seriously. So they got to fix that.
Also, I think yes, and I don't think it's as easy to referee this sport.
No.
I think
as us watching at home in slow motion, no, of course not.
Not even that. Think about where this sport has become. Think about all the dudes running 4.340s at the combine that just happened, right? So the athletes have never been more talented. They've never been faster. They've never been more adept. And you also add in the sort of scheme wrinkles of stuff like RPOs, where yes, you can go back and in slow motion determine that, yes, he was probably 3 or 4 feet past the allotted yardage on this pass play. It's never been easier to see that on TV, but also how are these guys supposed to, and gals, supposed to keep track of everything all at once when all of the players have never been faster and more athletic? We've also evolved to the point where it's just a more difficult job, no matter how many referees are on the field, no matter how often they're getting a paycheck.
Yeah.
And the rules change every year, right? So then you have a lot of subjective things where you're just it's a bang, bang moment. And yes, there's review, but you have to keep track of what was the intent and spirit of this rule? Well, and you have to do it quickly. I just think it's never been more difficult. So I do have sympathy for them.
Let's shift gears. I got 2 left here, at least on my list.
Yes.
I broke apart NIL and I guess revenue sharing as its own deal, separate from the portal, even though they're very much interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so much of the conflict in the sport right now is at the intersection of the two. But if we could, let's try to break each out as its own thing. Because for sure, we could do a full episode on NIL. We could do a full episode on the portal if we really, really wanted. Let's start with NIL, Dan.
Yeah.
NIL, revenue sharing, call it whatever you want, the idea of paying players. 1 through 5.
So we're just talking about money, NIL, revenue sharing, whatever.
Money, revenue sharing, paying players in general.
I have it as a 3.
I also have it as a 3.
I have it as a 3. I have it as a 3 because I think the ability for players to monetize their market value, whatever, is a 5.
100% agree. 100% agree.
That is a 5 because the money, the numbers cut through. The numbers that coaches are making, the numbers that administrators are making, both to coach and not coach. We know those numbers. We know those dollar figures. We know what the TV deals are worth, right? We know how much money is in this sport. We know how much money some of the bigger boosters have donated to schools and programs to build facilities and to bankroll whatever, stadium expansions, and take your pick, right? That where the money gets earmarked to fund. And we know these players have value. And so for them to participate in the money in this sport, it was time. It was long time. So that to me is a 5. Where it's a 1 for me is feeling like there's zero rules, zero transparency,
enforcement or lack thereof,
zero enforcement, right? That there's money that it just all feels kind of like dark money, like dark political money here, where we don't know terms of contracts. We know that contracts are basically unenforceable. We know that players try to sue their way out of everything, which on a certain level, you're like, yes, they should fight for their rights if there are no obvious guardrails to the contracts they signed. But it feels icky, for lack of a better term, that a lot of what is decided on the field gets first decided in a courtroom. And we're forced to learn, or in my case, barely learn about injunction law.
That's been the hardest part of this job. Trying to act as a lawyer when we talk about some of these things.
Yeah. Some people, if a college football fan would be like, hey, explain the whole injunction thing to me, be like, well, let me hit you back in a few days.
Let me give you Matt Brown's email address. He'll answer you.
So everything surrounding the idea of paying players, whether it's the school via revenue sharing, whether it's collectives, and obviously collectives are circumventing the spirit of why NIL exists, and they're able to circumvent the spirit of it because the guardrails weren't put into place in a firm enough manner. So that to me is the bummer of it all. And then if somebody reports, whether it's on a team site level or a national level or a regional level, I heard this guy's getting paid $2.8 million to play left tackle for Tennessee or something. 1, you don't know if that's true. 2, you don't know if that's including incentives or, certain
right
benchmarks
is that the total
that he needs
value
to hit
of the contract. Is that
it's
who knows?
And it's like, okay, he's making 2.8 if he ends up playing in bowl games, and so that it's so opaque to me is this whole universe. It brings it down to me. And so I just think it detracts from so much of the fun of it, not the money, but the structure of the money.
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said at the top, college football for the lion's share of our lives was defined by pageantry and loyalty and maybe some of those things that we sort of romanticized.
Yeah.
And were never really true. But that's what we believe. That's at least the faceplate that was on college football. Kids would choose your school because they wanted to go there.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the money. But NIL has obviously changed that. It has made a lot of this feel transactional. I do think some of that is taken away from the spirit that many of us grew up on with respect to college football. But I think morally, I think ethically, players being able to earn off of their likeness is the right thing. So from that standpoint, I would agree it's 5 out of 5. But the enforcement's like a 0. There is none right now.
Right.
There really isn't. The NCAA is useless. It doesn't want to do anything because it doesn't want to get sued. No matter how many of these photo ops we put forth in the federal government, I don't think there's a real appetite, certainly not with everything going on in today's world, to put anything in place that realistically solves this. I don't even know what that would look like, short of saying that the players are employees and allowing them to, have additional rights on that front.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. We'll bring Matt Brown on. Maybe he can say something to the contrary. I would welcome that. But the combination of the enforcement and maybe the lack of desire to do anything to put up any real guardrails, I think make this still very Wild Westy, and it's going to be that way for a good long time. The other thing that I would add, and this sort of falls in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
I remember having a conversation right when NIL and the portal sort of converged and created this new iteration of college football. And Andy Staples was very big at the time on, hey, let's let this play out. Let's let the market set itself. Let's see how it works. Let's see how this goes. We have seen this type of thing in other capacities, and over time it tends to work itself out, and the market eventually does what the market does.
Yeah.
Do you feel like we've got to the point yet where the market's corrected itself?
Well, sometimes markets crash too.
Yeah, well, sometimes they do.
Yeah.
I don't feel like we've gotten to the point yet where the market has corrected itself, because every time I look, the numbers keep going up.
Right.
There was just a story out this past week or a week or two ago about Cam Coleman basically getting a blank check. The ask was a blank check, and Texas more or less gave it to him.
Right.
At some point, you have to stop calling it like a correction period or a probationary period and just realize that this market is not going to fix itself anytime soon. That somebody may need to step in and set this thing or fix this thing or put up some stronger guardrails to keep this thing on the tracks.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, yes, markets can increase, but all you really need is 2 schools to push a deal, right? Cam Coleman's making whatever he's making because there was another school, not Texas, I would assume, pushing this deal up, maybe because they wanted Cam Coleman, maybe they just wanted to see how much they could get Texas to pay. Who knows? Yeah. But I don't believe 37 schools came in with like, yes, we all agree Cam Coleman is worth, however many millions of dollars. Like, I think the overwhelming majority of schools don't have what they view to be infinite money and are looking at this, very much are dealing with having a cap. And like, this is where we value a starting right tackle. This is what we value, a starting weak side linebacker or safety or quarterback or whatever. And if it goes over that number, we're just going to pass.
Yeah.
I think people are looking at this a lot more pragmatically than this is getting out of control, because it really does only take a handful of schools, and just 2 in a lot of cases, probably saying like, this offer's on the table for $2 million. What can you do? And they put, 2, 3, and then, a lot of schools are just going to pay whatever. Not a lot. There are always going to be some schools that are going to pay whatever it takes. But some of those schools are going to look back and say, we ended up spending $27 million on an average of 7 or 8 wins.
Yeah.
And we're just not going to do it anymore because the people writing those checks aren't seeing the return on that investment they wanted. But again, it just takes 2 schools to push some of those numbers up to a place that seems cartoonish, but it doesn't mean every starting left tackle is making Jordan Seaton money or something.
I think that's right. And that brings us to, as I have labeled it, the biggest point of contention, I think, in the sport today.
Yeah.
It is not just NIL. It is not just the transfer portal. It is the intersection of the two. That is where the real damage, if you want to call it that is where it's happening. Mm-hmm. So I think we were both, relatively in agreement, 3 out of 5-ish for NIL in the portal? Or NIL and
just NIL
and
rev share, right.
Like a 3 out of 5?
I think it's okay. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's the end of the world.
I'm at a 2 on the transfer portal.
I'm at a 2, and I was almost at a 1.
I was almost at a 1.
But you're Mr. Portal in December.
I could have made a case for a 0. I really could have.
Okay. So I have a 2 just because I think the portal offers enough flexibility in enough cases that can be viewed as a positive.
Yes. So let's agree on this as our baseline.
Okay.
Players deserve the right to move around the way coaches move around.
I think that is right. That players should have
let's
rights.
Put it this way.
Yeah.
Or just a little bit more power than they had before.
I think.
I don't like how much power the schools had over them before. They deserve some agency here.
Agree.
It shouldn't be the type of thing where the schools have to grant or deny transfer requests. That part of it was broken. It needed to change, and it did.
Yeah.
So I think we're in agreement that giving the players back some control in this realm is a good thing.
Yes.
Right? We agree on that much.
Yeah, especially given not just that coaches have the ability, it's that you can be recruited to a place by a running backs coach who then takes a job with the Steelers the day after signing day.
Right.
And you're just like, well, I guess I'm playing for Kansas State now. And that's something that's not great. That the freedom for a coach to move like in that specific way, or a head coach to leave after a year, like, what we had this year with Charles Huff with Southern Miss. We had with Todd Graham, Pitt, ASU. Like, we've had that in years past where a head coach just leaves and completely firebombs a program after a year. So that to me is not ideal. And there should be wiggle room for players, especially if they have value and they happen to be playing at a smaller place and they can capitalize on something that is life-changing money before the NFL.
Right.
Like, it would be tough to imagine. I'm not speaking for Khalil Mack, okay? But it's tough to imagine a 2026 Khalil Mack at Buffalo playing out his career there. It has happened. We saw it with like Ashton Genty at Boise State. We've seen it. What's his name? The corner from Toledo, who I guess is a star for the for the Eagles now. We have seen it, but it's rare, and you understand why the next Khalil Mack will end up playing for, like Jared Verse from Albany to Florida State. I think those are terrific situations for these guys to prove what they can do at a much higher level. And it's been good for us as fans who've enjoyed entertaining high quality teams.
I do worry that the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction, though.
Quinyon Mitchell,
right now.
by the way.
Quinyon Mitchell, that's it. The sport right now is in a constant state of free agency and tampering. All of it happens behind the scenes, right? Everybody knows about it. Nobody can really stop it. The rosters feel very temporary. Some players kind of feel like mercenaries.
Sure.
This is different. You mentioned it earlier. The contracts are kind of meaningless, right? A player can sign one place. It can be Darian Mensah, have a contract in place and just get out of it because nobody's got the wherewithal or the marbles to enforce it.
And by the way, he's good quarterback who's going to play for 3 teams in 3 years as a good quarterback.
As a very good quarterback.
Yeah.
As a very good quarterback. If you're a fan of a G5 team, if you're a fan of a mid-major or mid-tier team, I guess I should say, the portal has effectively turned your program into a feeder system to a minor league team. And that's tough. Speaking of things that feel transactional.
Yeah.
I think that's a real problem.
But you have the ability, in a way, if you're one of those schools, and I just saw Trent Dilfer. What did he call his players? Did you see this? Did you see the Trent Dilfer?
I try to avoid Trent Dilfer. What did I miss?
He basically said it was a huge mistake for him to take a bunch of like washout leftovers at UAB, and how they were at UAB because they were not able to rise to the moment at bigger places. They were shrinkers, not risers. My words. I think he said shrinkers though.
Okay.
But a lot of the better schools on this level, or the better coaches, can identify players at even smaller schools, or identify players who don't work out and are able to establish a culture and convince players to play hard, who didn't end up seeing the rotation at Virginia Tech or Cal or something. That it does go in both ways if you're savvy about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't know how you fix it. Like we've kicked around a couple ideas here. The old transfer fee model.
Yeah. Or you get one free transfer without sitting out, and then.
Yeah. So when I say the transfer fee model, what I mean is if a school wants a player from, it doesn't need to be a smaller program, but just from anywhere, the way it works most of the time in professional soccer is you got to pay a fee to get him. So sorry, Bowling Green, we're going to take Harold Fannin, whoever.
Yeah.
But in exchange, you're going to get $10 million, and you can use that then to boost your own roster. I don't know how close we are to anything like that, but the legal viability is separate from the fact that it's an idea.
By the way, sidebar, shout out Harold Fannin. It's awesome.
He is awesome. Yeah. Loved him. I don't know if that's something that they could do to try and fix this. I saw that there is something circulating right now. I believe it was Ross Dellinger just posted this recently, a couple days ago, out on Yahoo Sports, talking about this new phase of blind transferring.
Sure.
Which is outside of the transfer portal. A player just leaves school and enrolls somewhere else, and in effect, that is a transfer.
Is that like Jason Bourne operating outside of the law?
Kind of,
extrajudicial? Is that okay?
And it sounds like there could be a wave of players that do something like that after spring football. Apparently, the NCAA Football Oversight Committee is looking at things like fines, coaching suspensions, maybe roster spot reductions for schools that accept transfers outside of the portal window. So they're kind of trying on that front, but it just feels like they're trying to eat the elephant here. There's just so many different things that make this a really hard problem to solve, and the transfer portal has been something of a runaway train here over these last couple of years. So I don't know if it's finding a better way to enforce it. I don't know if it's some sort of fee system. I don't know if it's maybe even a calendar that doesn't overlap with the playoffs. I don't know if it's just giving it more time to figure itself out. I don't know what it is that ultimately fixes the portal, but of all the things that we jotted down here on our list, I guess we had like 7 of them.
Yeah.
This is the one for me. This is the one just from emails that we have received. I would just speak for myself as a fan. And this is coming from somebody who's a fan of 2 really big teams that have benefited by and large from the portal.
Mm-hmm.
This is the part of the sport that I think people have the most issue with, and that has taken away the most from their fandom as they used to know it. Not necessarily because it's a bad thing. I think most people agree it's a good thing to give players that agency, but the way that it's multiplied has made it really tough to keep track of what's going on.
Well, also the temporary nature of flying in for a year or two rather than being recruited, developing as a backup or a redshirt or something like that, earning a starting job and thriving at a school. Like, there is nobody listening to this show that grew up a fan of the team exclusively because they were from an area or that a parent went to that school. Everybody's fandom, 100%, you talk about 21% under the age of 30 because we have range maxing on this show.
We're range maxing, yeah.
100% of everybody listening to this show is a fan of college football, at least partially because they loved Rocket Ishmael when they were 10 or whatever, like you were. Or they loved Rob Johnson at USC. Or they loved, Jesse Palmer coming in and out of games for Florida. Or they, you cannot tie fandom exclusively to a logo or a uniform because you got to watch Peter Warwick or Javon Curse or T. Martin or something like that. Like, fandom is directly tied to names. I'm never going to care as an Oregon fan nearly as much about Bo Nix, as great as he was for Oregon, as much as I was for Joey Harrington or Marcus Mariota or Darren Thomas, because those were Oregon people from the jump who I knew as backups and then knew as a starter, then knew as a star. And so when you take something like that away, when everybody is just coming in and out, or there's a lot of people coming in and out, like, Indiana fans are going to treasure the memories that Fernando Mendoza gave this year's team. They're going to remember this year's team forever. But my opinion is, when they think about this year's Indiana National Championship, they're going to think about the improbability of their program. And they're going to think about Kurt Signetti ahead of thinking about some of the players who are here for a year or 2 years. They're going to love and appreciate them, but that's not going to be what they think about, and that's not what they're going to hold in their heart nearly as much as they're going to think about, like, can you imagine Indiana beat Oregon twice? Indiana beat Miami? Like, they're going to think about the improbability. Like, it's just, you're taking away some of the sort of foundational aspects of college football fandom when your defensive line is all transfers, when your secondary is all transfers, or 4 out of 5 guys, or your offensive line is all transfers. You're just like, yeah, that guy came in for a year. That guy was there. And so the extreme portaling, either of schools bringing in a ton of players or players going to 3-4 places, I think is a net loss for the sport.
All right. Why don't we leave it there?
Yeah.
One and all, please write in solidverbal@gmail.com. Go out to the website, send us a form, hit us up on social media. Let us know your thoughts. I did some back of the napkin averaging here, some average maxing, as it were.
Uh-huh.
I believe I've got us at about a 3.6 out of 5 overall.
Oh,
if
okay.
we're looking at the health of college football.
So decent
here
with
in
upside.
2026. decent with upside. If you went to the doctor and you got a 3.6 out of 5, he would say, all right, I'm not a 1.
Got some work to do.
Got some work to do, but I think it's just low enough to keep you motivated, and it's high enough to leave you feeling optimistic about the future.
Have you had your physical in the last year?
I am due to go for one, I would say, within the next 4 to 6 weeks or so.
What do you think the reports are going to be? You got cholesterol, right? That's the thing that, and you're a very healthy person, right? That's what you got to work on.
I eat like a bird.
Yeah.
It's just it's hereditary
yeah.
thing. Yeah. Yeah, we've been working to bring that down a little bit.
Okay, good.
I don't know how much more salad I can eat, but we've been working.
You've been hitting the gym, right?
Been hitting the gym, yeah.
So
we've been doing our part.
I think you're going to get a great report, Ty. Are you worried about anything specific?
No, not really.
You think you're shrinking at all? Are you worried for that measurement?
I think I'm okay. No, I think I'm all right.
All right.
I think I'm all right on that front. But no, we're health maxing here a little bit.
Health maxing. You're not going to get mogged by the physician.
No.
Okay.
No. How about you? Where are you at?
Everything good. The cholesterol I think was good, but could be better.
Okay.
But everything else came back good. I'm active.
This is, by the way, for the 21% under 30.
You have this to look forward to. Ty and I had like a very specific oatmeal conversation before this show began. Not even like,
you always bring that up when I've got like LaCroix or water or something in my mouth.
We're fiber maxers here on the Solid Verbal. That's
yeah.
If nothing else,
yeah,
that's where you should learn about us. We fiber max. Continue.
Well, we appreciate everybody downloading, listening, supporting what we do. Again, verballers.com is the Patreon if you want to go out and directly support our efforts here. Also, solidverbal.com/store will get you out to the merch store where you can pick up a few odds and ends if you want to don the verbal out in public.
Yeah.
We would, of course, greatly appreciate that. Let your friends know. Hit follow, hit subscribe if you made it this far. All right. We will be back next week on the podcast, 2 episodes per week, all throughout the off season. We do have a bonus episode that drops on the Patreon feed every Thursday.
Yeah.
We've been having a lot of fun with those. More often than not, it is not college football related, though we like to drizzle a little bit of that in, albeit there's not a whole lot going on right now in the world of college football. So we will include as much as we can. We will have fun with it. Otherwise, we would encourage you to check that out one more time. verballers.com, Dan.
Yes. That's all I have.
Have a good weekend.
Hey, you too.
For that guy out there in Chicago, my good friend Dan. For myself, Ty, over here in Eastern Pennsylvania. We'll catch you all next week. In the meantime, stay solid.
Peace.